Reid. A member for Reid.
Thank you, Deputy Speaker. Apologies for the delayed jump. Is it any wonder people are cynical? Is it any wonder? Thank you. Thank you to the honourable member opposite. We have just spent an hour and a half talking about where this debate should happen. It's just mind-blowing. And the Prime Minister said something last night, and I follow the member for Watson, and he and I attended the same school. He was a year ahead of me, but our paths parted at that point. The member for Watson went and studied at university, I'm sure, got involved in student politics and unions and went to the State Parliament of New South Wales and then ended up here. I, through university, worked in my family's business, the third generation of my family to do so, and upon completing that degree, started work full-time, had 23 years working for my father. And the Prime Minister last night said something that really captured my heart in a speech he gave to the Business Council of Australia. He challenged the business community to not sit in the grandstand, to not stay in the armchair, but to engage in the debate. And there's been a lot said this week about mature and sensible debate. Deputy Speaker, I've had 14 months here, and I'm sad to say that I think that that's a political oxymoron. The Prime Minister this week has raised issues of our federation. I'll talk about this later. We stand at a crossroads as a country. I was sitting in my family's business. Life made sense. And the Prime Minister, what he said last night, captured and encapsulates my motivation to be here. And unlike the member for Watson and all those opposite, sitting on this side of the House, we have doctors, lawyers, farmers, vets, teachers, people that have been in the front lines before they have come here, people that have grappled with all that it is red tape. I rise to obviously talk against the amendment and to support the original bill, the Omnibus Repeal Day Spring 2014. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister, first and foremost, who had the foresight to take this into his portfolio and put in charge my good friend, the member for Kooyong. By running this out of the Prime Minister's own portfolio, he dictated to our side how serious he was about attacking this problem, this most burdensome of problems that chokes business at every turn. And the member for Kooyong did me the great honour of coming to me very early upon my election, knowing that I came from a business background, and asking would I give him a hand, and I was humbled to do so. The member for Kooyong has worked tirelessly on not just the first repeal day, but this the second. This is not the start of things. This is the continuation of a journey that this government will not turn its back on, and we will not make fun of. I understand, having been in business and having faced not just federal government but all three levels, which I'll talk about later, what this actually looks like and what hurdles you have to jump through as a result. I have sat here for an hour and 35 minutes and I've watched those opposite laugh, interject and belittle and treat every business operator in Australia with disdain. And I say shame on you. We are not only delivering— the good thing about this bill today, we went with one— here it is again, hyphens and commas. It shows you the depth of the business understanding on the other side. We have gone to the election with a commitment of $1 billion a year. I want to congratulate the Parliamentary Secretary, the member for Kooyong, because today he announces $2.1 billion in savings. Outstanding. Keep it up, Josh. This government recognises the importance of cutting red tape. Every day we are looking at ways of building a strong and prosperous economy for Australia and removing the burdens. A report released overnight by Deloitte Access states that government regulation costs $27 billion a year to administer, that's us, and costs business $67 billion a year to comply with. That's $94 billion for those that haven't done the mental arithmetic. We have established deregulation units across government, and each minister has been instructed to undertake portfolio audits and identify areas in his or her portfolios where over-regulation is a problem. And there are many of these areas, Deputy Speaker. The former government introduced, and you've heard about the 16,000 they took away. What they omitted to tell you was the 21,000 pieces of new legislation in their last 6-year term. And that's just at a federal level. And that's on top of all the pre-existing legislation that it already sits in the statute books that businesses have to deal with. As the Prime Minister said in his speech last night to the Business Council of Australia, our job is to reduce regulations so that business is busy innovating rather than lobbying. I say hear to that too, the member for Kooyong. One particular area of note that we are achieving savings for Australian companies is our competitiveness agenda, where we have streamlined regulatory arrangements. Earlier this year, I met with a range of industry representatives from the hygiene and cosmetics industry and heard case after case of regulatory overlap, inefficiencies, pointless bureaucracy and duplication. And I'll give you an example, and I've said this in this House before. NICNAS, the TGA and APVMA cross 3 ministerial portfolios. Navigating products through those 3 portfolios was not only at the point of having ground to a halt, there was the absurd situation where a cosmetic company wanted to put some rolled oats into a pack to release for kids as a Christmas promotion. They got notified by NICNAS that it was, under their definitions, a chemical that could not be dispensed to children. Rolled oats, Deputy Speaker. I don't know about you, Deputy Speaker, I know you've got a young family, but my kids live on rolled oats, especially in winter. This cross-ministerial portfolio creep and these bodies like NICNAS, TGA and APVMA that operate off budget, that are a cost recovery model, that is the stuff that we're talking about here. That is what the member for Watson has missed completely. A one-stop shop, I noticed he didn't mention this, for environmental approvals. And I heard the member for Kooyong say $426 million in compliance costs, but thinking as a businessman thinks, here's the kicker, it is estimated that we'll gain $120 billion to the GDP of the economy over the next 12 years as a result. One example the Prime Minister used last week was Cochlear, and I know the member for Kooyong and I have spoken of this. Cochlear is very close to my family's heart for personal reasons, and it's an organisation that I've spoken about prior in this place. We have changed the regulation to allow Cochlear to use the international recognised European Union certification, isn't that a mouthful, and avoid having to go through another certification process here in Australia. This means thousands of people will be able to access their devices up to a year earlier than they would have been, and these significant life-changing devices count, Deputy Speaker. Take it from me on a personal level. To give you a local example, I met a gentleman in my electorate who closed his factory. It was too late. We couldn't save him, the member for Kooyong. He told me anecdotally that he has relocated his business and 22 jobs to New Zealand. Why? Because the cost of bringing chemicals into this country was prohibitive. It was cheaper to do in New Zealand. We changed that today. And what is happening as a result of that, unfortunately for this gentleman and for the 22 Australians that lost their job, it was too late. But it's not too late looking forward for this not to happen again. Deputy Speaker, while I applaud the Prime Minister and the Parliamentary Secretary for their work in this space, I can't help but think to myself there is so much more to do. And I'm not just talking about repealing unnecessary regulations and easing the burden of red tape for Australian business, as important as that is. In a week where we are challenging all in this place to have a mature and sensible debate about the future of our federation, I believe what lies at the heart of this bill has been, in fact, a major failing of our federation. I spoke in my maiden speech of the fact that with 6 states, 2 territories and a federal government, this country is like a business with 9 head offices. When you add the 564 local governments across Australia, the problem becomes magnified in a way that is unsustainable and must be addressed. At all 3 levels of government, we are lacking people that come from a small and family business background, people that have a commercial understanding of what red tape looks like, because they battle with it every day of their business life. They understand that every business in this country has 2 sides to their profit and loss statement, revenue and expenses, and that when revenue is soft, the management of expenses becomes even more vital. Red tape has a direct impact on the expense side of every business in Australia. When you multiply the impact through each level of government, it results in a dramatic increase in expenses and an equally dramatic decrease in business profits as a result. In my mind, this is where the most massive failure of the past 113 years of our federation lies. We should not only have a mature and rational debate, we must act and we must chance our mindset. And today, with my background in family business, I want to attempt to add to this debate in a way that I believe has been up until today missing. What I am hoping to see is an understanding in government, no matter federal, state or local, that we are more than lawmakers and regulators, and here's the key, we are business partners. The past 113 years has focused far too heavily on the regulatory mentality, without looking at the actions we take in this place through the eyes of a business partner. A partner who works to promote business and the enterprising spirit of Australians, rather than a government whose work all too often restrains Australian business. Through our corporate tax system, we take between 30 and 49 cents of every dollar of profit a business makes, depending on ownership structure. I can't stress this enough. We are not simply regulators and legislators. We are stakeholders in the profitability of every business that calls Australia home. Deputy Speaker, this bill, actually, the $94 billion, to put it in some context, if that's a company structure, that's a third ours. The $94 billion of costs we are imposing takes $94 billion from business profitability in this country, and we get between 30 and 49 cents in the dollar, to relate it back to the Deloitte Access Economics report released this morning. And at this stage in our fiscal process, we need to make sure that revenue through taxation is as high as it can be. We must change our thinking to be more than regulators. We are business partners. Rather than legislators, we are stakeholders. And I'm talking about, the member for Kooyong, cultural change. In my maiden speech, I challenged the ministers in this government to run their departments as you would run a business, lean and efficient. But I was short-sighted here in saying this, as short-sighted as those that have come before me. Yes, ministers must lead from the front and promote this commercial mentality, but we must also work to encourage their departments to think like both regulators and stakeholders. It's the same challenge for them that it is for us. What I'm trying to promote here is a complete change in culture. Ministers must continue to challenge their departments to streamline existing regulation and introduce future regulation in a way which makes the cost of complying as minimal as possible, so that profit can be as large as possible, and so can our share. We must have a mindset change across this entire parliament and look at the challenges ahead of the Australian economy with a more commercial approach. I believe it is vital for the Prime Minister to make these issues front and centre of COAG discussions. It should be a priority at the most senior levels of this country, as the more profit our businesses make, the more revenue we as a government collect through taxation, and the more we can spend on states and territories. And with a coalition government, that revenue will be spent on large-scale projects that create jobs, improve productivity and promote prosperity throughout the country. Given the fiscal position we find ourselves in as a nation, there's no doubt we need to address this revenue side of government as well. But we must be smart about how we increase that revenue. In this respect, I congratulate the Prime Minister for undertaking the White Paper on reform of Australia's tax system and look forward to the discussions ahead of this. Deputy Speaker, it is time to have a mature and sensible discussion about the future of our federation, but we can't do that without pointing to its failings. And when the regulatory framework ties up business, adds to their expenses and lowers their profitability to the point of pushing the business offshore, these issues should be at the core of the debate. In his address last night, the Prime Minister said, "We can be fans in the stands, we can be armchair critics, or we can help make it happen." That's the call to arms. Deputy Speaker, I congratulate the Parliamentary Secretary. That's his call to arms. He's done an outstanding job. I am honoured to have been involved in this in some small part, and I would like to leave with one thought of to highlight how important this is. With a World Economic Forum global ranking of 124 out of 148 countries for the burden of government regulation, it couldn't be more apparent that these measures today are not only urgent, are a start and need to continue for the future of not only our federation, but much, much more importantly, for the future of our children. Thank you, Deputy Speaker.
I thank the honourable member for